Hey everyone, give me just a second to try to get people waiting to come in. We'll give it just one more minute while we wait on folks. All right, so I usually do the meetings or the live Q&As at 5 or 6. This one is really big and has some very deep questions, which is why I decided to start it at 4. Also, I'm using earbuds for the first time, so if you can't hear me, please let me know. In fact, I don't see the chat room. Okay, there it is. Yeah, if you guys can't hear me, okay, thank you, Allison. So yeah, we've got a lot to cover today. So for the sake of not being here 2 hours or longer, I like went ahead and gave myself some notes on these questions. So I'm going to do things a little bit differently. What I typically do is I read the question and then I kind of just let myself go on a rant. I don't do much preparation. I just kind of respond live. This time I did give myself some verbiage because I can tend to kind of go off a bit. I'm going to try to stay focused so we can get to everybody's questions. And then there are a couple questions at the end from folks that I was going to mention. I have some videos coming up about those. They're really in-depth questions, so it'll be better to just go over those totally on their own. But for the most part, I'm going to try to answer everything, and we've got some really, really good stuff to go over. So here we go. Oh, and then also just wanted to say, I always forget to go through this, and I know it can be a little confusing for people. Um, when you sign up, we have 4 tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And um, for the sake of days like today where I have so many questions, I prioritize questions based on tiers. Each tier kind of comes with a certain amount of questions answered. And I know another thing that's been a little bit difficult for folks is questions are asked on Discord. The Discord app is amazing. It's something that I'm really trying to lean more into this year because of a few reasons. One, it's a chat room, which is great. It's like a social meeting place that's not ran by terrible people like Instagram, Facebook, Amazon, etc. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that it's community managed, which is super cool. So I want to create a few more threads on there. If you guys ever have requests for threads that you would like, please let me know. I'm going to be adding one for folks that are reading or have read Braiding Sweetgrass. When I read that book, it prompted so many ideas for me, and I know it does for most other people too. So I really want to start a chat room where we can kind of talk about some of the ideas presented in that book, and whatever else. So if you guys have ideas for threads that you would like to see on there, please feel free to ask. That chat room is for you guys. Like, that Patreon is where I show up to go over like my topics of choice, and you guys show up to listen. Um, and it is of course a community. Like, you guys help me decipher what content we go over, but Discord is super community focused. You guys can go there and ask each other questions about whatever, and the benefits of that are so vast to me. On Instagram, it's totally public. We're kind of just like echoing into the holler. We hope that, people with similar interests will hear and join us. Well, the Plant Lovers chat room is a place where all of you are literally here for the same reason. Everyone is learning, is excited about learning, is interested in community. So it's a really cool place to go with questions, or maybe you've taken a cool course or read a cool book that you want to share about. So I love Discord. I hope you guys do too. I hope we can all kind of lean into it more as social media is starting to feel a little bit shadier and shadier by the minute. And then also just to tell you guys why I like the questions asked there, on Patreon and on Discord, there's nothing that tells me what tier you are. In fact, a lot of you have like fun usernames on Discord, and so I don't even know who you are. Like if your name is like, Flower Pumpkin, I'm not sure if that's like Allison or Carissa, right? So I have no way of knowing who you are and what tier you're on. So when you ask on Discord, I just ask that you enter your questions under the appropriate thread, tier 3 and 4, tier 2 in general. It just helps me to organize this list. It helps me know who you are, what videos you have and haven't seen, because each tier has different access to videos and all that. And then of course you can private message me questions if you would like to remain anonymous. So okay, here we go. We had a few different questions that were on a very similar train of thought. Good to know. Thank you, Allison. So you might not hear your exact verbiage, but I made a note to myself to talk about the different methods for tincturing and oil infusing. We had a question about using herb grinders and or a Vitamix, and talking about which methods work best with powdered herbs and why, the difference of adding heat versus no heat for infusions. So I'm just going to kind of briefly cover all these methods. This is a lot, so if you want to go deeper, I made this recommendation to someone on Discord in the book section. There is a book called The Modern Herbal Dispensary, and that book is basically the foundations. And a lot of herbal courses like use it as a textbook, a guide. And that's because the author of that book really goes into a little bit of everything. It's like a toe dip into everything. And it's great because most herbalists who are teaching about their methods exclusively, which is wonderful, which is why I recommend learning from lots of teachers. But the author of this book specifically like made a foundational book where they discuss a little bit about every method. So that's a great place to start. That was another question from Kara. Where would you suggest someone start if they're new to the educational side of herbalism? Where would you recommend someone dive in to start learning more about plants and their uses? I'm going to answer that question a little bit more, but definitely if you are brand new and you're wanting to explore all the different methods, that book is something that I feel like everybody might as well have. It even has a tiny section in the back about, that's just like plant monographs and stuff like that. But that will tell you about the folk method of tincturing versus not, the double boiler versus the no heat versus seed mat. Like there's so many methods. So first I want to talk about, someone asked about the Vitamix and herb grinders. I wish I had mine handy. So Vitamix is great. If you have a Vitamix and you're going to be powdering herbs regularly, I would recommend getting their grain powder. They have an attachment that's for grains, basically, powdering grains. And it's a good idea to have that for powdering herbs, because if you're powdering herbs with a Vitamix, the Vitamix pulls everything down and really packs it down under the blade, which can cause moisture and just not, it can cause like half the herbs to powder and half of them not. So the grains attachment is specifically for powdering herbs. The blade goes up a little higher. It just makes it a little easier. On the other hand, Vitamixes are really expensive, so if you're not using it for multiple things, buying an herb grinder is a lot cheaper. And if you're not powdering that much herbs, but you're like kind of interested in making maybe like some bath salts or poultice or something, use a coffee grinder. But if you are like me and you're powdering herbs more regularly, you're really jumping all in, go ahead and buy a specific herb grinder. And I hate to recommend Amazon, but all of the industrial herb grinders are coming from China. And the place to really like see them all and read reviews is unfortunately Amazon. Of course, you could go to Amazon, read about like what brand you'd like, what size, and then go to their website. But they all look identical. They're likely all coming from the same manufacturer in China. They just have different volumes of how much herbs they hold. But those are incredible because they're made to be able to grind rocks. So in our smoky taboo tea, I use cedar heartwood. Well, we are literally chopping that cedar wood and then, you know, processing it into small chunks. And then I am powdering hard wood in that herb grinder. I'm also using that herb grinder for hard resins like frankincense, myrrh, gagol, pine, etc. So it's a really good idea if you're going to be doing, you know, heavy powdering of herbs like that. Now, this person asked, like, why would you use that method and like what herbs would it be best for? Let me grab something for you. This is a pretty serious piece of equipment, so I definitely don't think this is the kind of thing that like everybody should get. But if you're interested in this method, which again, this is not the only method I use, this is not like my favorite method, but I do think it's cool. And this is percolation. So I've got lab glass that I'm opening. Well, I guess I'll leave that in. So basically, you would get a piece of lab glass. This is your holder here. I don't know how well you guys can see that. And I would have this all the way up here because I would have my jar that was catching it at the bottom underneath it. And essentially what's happening right here is you're creating a very slow percolation drip. And you can either use these filters. I tend to use organic unbleached cotton balls. It's just a little harder to find these like lab filters that are organic and unbleached. But percolation is a method where you use powdered herbs and you're tincturing them. I am actually getting ready to experiment doing an oil infusion with a percolator because I haven't seen anybody post about doing that, and I think it could be really cool. So I'm probably going to make a video when I do that. And I'll make a video next time I do a percolation tincture as well. But essentially the idea is that you are taking your powdered herbs, you're wetting them, you're putting them in your cone filter in your glass, and then you're pouring all of your menstruum, your alcohol or whatever you're using on top of it, and you're slowly percolating. And the benefits to this and why a lot of herbalists use it is that turnaround time is much quicker. I still do the folk method more. I think that time is part of the energetic process. It's just my personal way of doing things. But I understand why people do percolation, and it is cool. So the idea is that when you're powdering herbs, you're exposing more molecules of the plant. All right, I can already tell I'm going to end up spending a half hour on this question, so I need to kind of reel it in. I will do a video on this. The idea of powdering herbs is that you're exposing more molecules of the plant. All of the plant surface is exposed, right? Whereas if you have a root, the inside of that root, although it is being soaked in your menstruum, is not necessarily exposed. So that's why people do percolation. It's very cool. I don't like the idea that it only takes like 24 to 48 hours. It just feels wrong to me. I feel like the seeping process is an important process, but that's just me. I think it's very cool to do the folk method of just, you know, loosely chopping your herbs up, putting them in your menstruum, letting them sit for a month. And then what I will do occasionally if I have time, sorry, is I will zap them either in the Vitamix or with an emulsion blender so that I am exposing those molecules, and I'll let them sit basically one more night before I strain them. And it's just to you know, it's just to add another step. It's just to see if you can express a little bit more. And there's, again, different reasons for each method, but essentially the bulk method of tincturing would be grabbing your plant matter. If it's fresh, you know, chopping it up, letting it steep for 4 weeks. If you're using powdered herbs, you're essentially going to do the same thing, but you probably have them already chopped. The amount of plant matter you're using is a little different. Fresh plants have water content in them, so you need a little bit less water to alcohol than you would with dried plants. Again, I will go more into this in another video. And then with oil infusing, to the person that asked me today, it's a new patron, about what's the difference in adding heat to your oil infusions versus not. I would recommend that you take a look at my oil infusion videos that I've posted thus far, which I wish that I could share. Maybe I can share my screen. I'm going to show you guys something really quick. Because I know some people are new to Patreon, and they have, you know, just some questions about how to view things. So let me see if I can find someone that I'm following and show you all this really quick. So basically, all I'm trying to show you all is that if you're on a computer and you click on my page or whoever's page, there are actually sections that help you navigate, and you can search. So let me share. Did I already click share screen? All right, so we're looking at Amber Magnolia Mythic Medicine Stories. So when I click her page, see these sections here, I can click herbalism, giveaway, ebooks, audio, online learning, or I could search posts. So I know sometimes it's hard because you guys ask questions and I'm like, actually, I already answered that in last month's plant walk or this month something something. And you're like, fuck, I got to scroll through all of these. Well, on the app, you do have this search bar, so you could search oil infusion. On your computer, you can click these little sections, and I've got several sections that should make it a little bit easier to help you search and navigate. So just keep that in mind, because if you guys are new here, there is so much content that's already been posted. We've got a video where we use a double broiler method to heat extract cottonwood buds, which are a very resinous plant. Well, when we're extracting resins, whether it's spruce, pine, myrrh, frankincense, cottonwood, even calendula is pretty resinous, we really need heat. It's not enough to just stick them in oil and put them on the shelf. We really need heat to loosen that resin and help it to dissipate into the oil. So we've got a video on that, and then we've also got a video where we're taking fresh plant matter. We're using fresh St. John's wort because it has to be used fresh. We're chopping it, we're rubbing it in alcohol, and then we're infusing it in oil. So we've already got those out there, and I will be making a video this month on oil extracting pine sap. So we'll kind of go over all these methods at one point or another, if we haven't already. So that's really the difference, is just, for example, with that percolation, and then there's, like, you know, people are using grinders, warming hot mats, double broilers. Like, a lot of these methods have just evolved as have, like, times and technology and equipment and stuff like that. But just remember, as you're building your foundations, that the simplest way of simply sticking plants in the material works. So everything else is extra to get it extra potent, extra colorful, extra flavorful. So try not to, like, overwhelm yourself. For example, I've been practicing herbalism for since I was 16, and I didn't get a percolator until last year. So just remember, like, these things are cool, but they're not necessary. I have a close friend who's been studying herbalism the past 2 years. It's newer to her. And she, every time I talk to her about things that I've got going on or that I'm doing, she feels the pressure to buy all the same things that I have and do all the same things that I have or that I'm doing. Um, but then she gets really overwhelmed and like gets close to the verge of wanting to give up. And I always just try to remember, like, remind her, my practice in herbalism has been incredibly slow. I took my time, I absorbed everything I could, and I did not start getting the fancy equipment until the past couple of years. So the beauty of herbalism is how simple it is and how primitive and intuitive and ancestral it is. So just be mindful of that. All right. Okay, that was only question one. I got to stop doing this. So for Kara's question, where would you suggest someone start? Where would you recommend someone dive in to start learning more about plants and their uses? So I just answered a lot of that, but to get more into learning about plants and their uses. So my introduction to herbalism was a little bit different. I had some foundations before I decided to self-lead, but I will say most of the time has been spent self-guided. And essentially, I learned very quickly that there are fuck tons of books for every region, every state, every person, different interests like edible plants, medicinal, etc. So what you really need to do is get basic field guides. If you're wanting to learn about foraging and identifying plants, get yourself a Peterson's field guide of plants to your region. And it's color coded. So how Francesco and I learned so much about the plants that are around us, which I truly feel like is my greatest skill, is when we moved to the property that we steward. I think it's been 5 years now. We were fascinated by how many plants were all around us. You know, he's been a chef, I've been an herbalist. We quickly recognized plants that we had been using that had just been growing on this property. And so we wanted to learn about everything that was there. And so basically what we did was just very intuitively, when we were going on our walks, we would take photos of plants, we would smell them, we would take a little nibble, we would maybe pick a sprig and bring it home to press into a book. And long story short, what we would do is learn about a plant one at a time. If I found a plant, I would come home, I would go through my books, the internet, etc. Once I identified the plant, I would, like, you know, confirm the identity with a field guide. Then I would start researching. Is this plant native or not? Is it invasive? Is it at risk? Once I kind of found all those things out, then I would start to see, is it edible? If it's edible, typically, or if it's medicinal, typically it's edible, right? Because we typically need to be able to ingest it. Although some plants are medicinal for topical use only. So we would start to dive into its edibility, its medicinal uses, absorbing information from different regions, different herbalists. And it sounds like a lot, but it would really take me like a day of diving into one or two plants at a time. And here's my most important piece of advice to you. I have a note on my phone that I have literally had since 2014. And essentially, every single time I identify a new plant, I write it down. I write down what it was, where I found it, what the date was. And I jot down a couple of the things that stuck out most to me. Is it edible? Is it flavorful? Because not everything that's edible tastes good. What medicinal properties sounded important to me? And that's how I would start to remember them, is I'd be like, oh, we like things that are minty and bitter, or are good for women's health, whatever. So just jot down a couple notes, keep a running list. Another thing, I don't love The plant identification apps, if you are going to use one, picture this is ran by actual botanists and herbalists. The cool thing is, every single plant that you identify or take a photo of on picture this, it tells you the month, the date, etc. So you can be looking back at a year of identifying plants on your property or in a region, and you can see what time of year you found them. So when we were becoming obsessed with identifying plants and familiarizing ourselves with them, I had the idea of, okay, we love these few spring greens, chickweed, violet, plantain, cleavers. There's so many in the spring. We would take a little sprig, press it in a book with a little piece of paper that said what it was. And what I wanted to do was basically eventually make like a monthly piece of paper that had a little sprig of all of our plants that we found and their names. And I still want to do that, and I still haven't done it. I have shit tons of books with pressed plants and their names in it. I just haven't constructed it onto a piece of paper yet. But start a note in your phone, or if you're more of a journaler, do that. I know people who used to come on my plant walks pre-COVID. When I would say what a plant was and what it did, they would snap a photo and write a caption on their phone. You could do that. You could use the app. That's my advice to you. All right, next question. Hey there, I know you've talked a lot about hair care, though I'm wondering if you have any recommendations specific to dandruff, perhaps herbs to take internally rather than externally. I'm going to read what I wrote down. So you mentioned that you had seen me talk about this before, but have you tried the things that I talked about before, would be my first question. There are definitely things you can take internally, but dandruff needs to be treated externally kind of just as much. We still don't know fully what causes dandruff and dermatitis, but more than likely it's a yeast overgrowth of some sort. So internally, focus on eating nourishing meals high in omega fatty acids and collagen peptides. Focus on gut health with herbs such as pau d'arco, ginger, anise, licorice, yarrow. I would recommend a probiotic if you're not taking one, maybe even pro and prebiotics. And then some silica supporting herbal infusions or a supplement if that's more your thing. Herbs such as nettle, horsetail, and oat straw are very specific to not just hair growth, but like hair upkeep and skin. They're very silica rich, and that's what our hair, skin, and nails need to be healthy and functioning, as well as pH balance. So externally, raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar and or lactic acid really helps to balance the pH. If you've watched my IGTV on hair care before, you know that you don't want to overdo that. Once or twice a week, do you want to do that? Not more. So our maiden hair rinse or any vinegar rinse is going to be good for you here. If you did not see our video a couple months back on making a fermented rice water conditioner, that would also be one of my greatest recommendations to you because it's fermented. And simply what you're doing is soaking the rice, massaging it. You're basically extracting the proteins from the rice into your rice water, and then you're fermenting it. And it's very good for your scalp and your hair. In my method that I go over in the video, I do add a couple herbs and some other stuff to it. So maybe check that out if you haven't checked it out before. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. Definitely whatever shampoo and conditioner you're using, if you're using one, is probably not doing it for you if you've got dandruff. If you've never tried the no poo method, I would highly suggest trying that. Most people with dandruff, that's why they switch to the no poo method, is to make their pH happy, to help clear up that excess yeast. Also, on the note of excess yeast, it's not always about what you're eating or drinking. Some people are more prone to excess yeast. Also, your environment is a factor, your gut is a factor. So, of course, diet really helps, but making sure that everything is happy, essentially. So that would be the point of using some antimicrobial digestive herbs, is to just make sure your gut's happy, that you're not, facilitating a breeding ground for excess candida and yeast. And then another thing I've been wanting to make a video on soon, it was an idea that I had the other day. A friend of mine recently shaved her head and her scalp's been really itchy and she just feels like her scalp needs to detox. If I were to make a sort of like hair mask, which I know most hair masks are conditioning, but like a mask like we use on our face to pull out impurities and buildup, I think a very simple paste of like salt, activated charcoal, bentonite clay, and then I like apple cider vinegar or coconut oil or tallow just to get it to stick on your head, maybe even honey, egg whites, whatever. But like those are the base for your paste of salt, charcoal, clay, apple cider vinegar. I think that that would be really, really good for just kind of helping with yeast buildup, product buildup, whatever is disturbing your scalp. And then, yeah, like I said, the infusion or the supplement of oat straw, nettle, horsetail, even just a silica supplement. I know the Jarrow formulas makes a really good one for hair, skin, and nails. Prenatal vitamins, those will definitely help. Also wondering if you have any recommendations for breast tenderness. I track my cycle and symptoms monthly, and I have noted I begin to have tenderness 10 days before I bleed. This is definitely a thing. I used to have this too. I don't anymore. This is not a plug for myself, but I used to get it a lot when I was like 15, 16, 17, before I started taking and making my moon cycle sync tincture. So I don't know if that helped. But before that, I had crazy breast tenderness where I would be at work and my boobs ached so much that I would have to go into the bathroom and press them up against the wall to get some relief. So I definitely feel your pain, and I'll tell you what worked for me was taking a supplement of evening primrose oil. It was magic. The age of 15 and 16 was when I really started being interested in making things for myself, and taking evening primrose oil for breast tenderness was one of those things that like blew my mind, where I was like, holy shit, herbs are incredible. So definitely try that. I would say take it every day at first. It might, you might need like 30 days for it to really get in your system. And then you could try just taking it like a week before it usually starts, and see if you need to use it all the time or not. Evening primrose oil is fine and safe though if you needed to take it 30 days a month. All right. So somebody else asked, I want to know more about November's Patreon tincture. How did you create it? What was your inspiration? The taste is so layered and wonderful, and the benefits are as well. So what she's talking about, for folks that might not be a tier 3 patron, we mailed out a tincture called Reflections of Love. It had rose, kava, damiana, ocotillo, mirapama, rose petal honey, cedarwood smoke, cinnamon, cardamom, allspice, and clove. It's pretty bomb. So I have things tinctured already. I don't think of a recipe and then get the herbs and tincture them. So that might be a little different for you guys because it's definitely a space issue. But my way of experiencing herbs, I love when I find an herb or I'm interested or curious about a herb, I immediately tincture it or infuse it in oil depending on what I would like to receive from the plant. So I've got shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of tinctures. And so I might be sitting there going, I want to make a formula for libido and sensuality and love and stimulation. And I might go, ooh, I wonder if I still have any ocotillo left. Like that's a herb that was really warming and nice for me. I wonder if I still have that like cinnamon chai spiced rose honey. Ooh, maybe some kava for relaxation, some damiana. And then I like scour my shelves and pull whatever I have off that list. And then I pour it together slowly, tasting it as I go. The cedar smoke tincture is something that Francesco did. He smoke infuses wax for our enfleurage, the Juniper Ridge enfleurage. And the last time he did it, he asked me if I would pour him some vodka into a pan, and he did. And so we smoke infused it, and it smells and tastes really good, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. So when I was making this tincture and the flavor was so wild, I figured I should throw some of that in there. So that's kind of like the behind the scenes on my processes. So I wish I had the little write-up that I made on this tincture, because that would answer the question, that some of the other questions, like my inspiration. Let me see if I can pull it up. Bam. Reflections of Love, a blend of warming, blood-moving, stimulant, aphrodisiac herbs. In our culture, we believe feeling aroused can only lead to one thing. This holds us back from so much potential for intimacy with the self. Each of the herbs in this blend have also been noted for helping to release pelvic tension, trauma blockages, and softening the frigidness we often feel toward intimacy. This is a powerful thing to meditate with. I highly suggest taking a full dropper and sitting in silence with yourself in a comfortable spot. No phones, no distractions. Take note of the crazy taste, from the mild numbness the kava causes to the strong warm sensation of the ocotillo and spices. Feel it warming from the throat to the pelvis. Be mindful of how you are sitting. If you're hunched over and closing yourself off, put your arms behind your back, allowing your chest, heart, and throat to stick out. From here, I recommend taking a few audible breaths or just deep belly breaths. Take notice of your thoughts and keep intrusive to-do lists and worries out of your mind so you can look directly at what else comes up. So that was kind of my inspiration there. Was I feel like whenever I am super connected to my sensuality, my desires, things that bring me pleasure, I feel a lot more grounded in my body. I feel a lot more grounded and direct with my needs, my wants. And so I wanted to give that, to other people. And these are really special herbs that I can't sell on a big scale, which is really what all of our tier 3 and 4 gifts are, is things that I can't make in large enough batches to offer to the public, but I can give to my patrons. So they're often full of special ingredients like ocotillo that you can't really buy online. Just special tidbits. Okay, she also asks about my CBD products. I want to know more about your process and what to use them for. So the reason that I even offer CBD products is because before I started my own business, I was working for a hemp farmer, one of the first hemp farmers in Tennessee, on his field, learning about growing it, processing it, etc. Well, when they first got into the business, they thought they were just going to grow and sell the buds. Me being a curious herbalist, I was interested in the extraction process. So I started extracting it for them, creating recipes for them for like CBD chocolate and random stuff like that. My business started growing, and so I had to work less on that farm and more for my business. And when I was still processing it, it just kind of made sense for me to offer it to my customers as well. And now I am no longer working on that farm. But it's still the same people that I worked with, I grew with. I know exactly, where it's grown, how it's being grown, how it's being processed, etc. And it's the only CBD that I can trust for that reason. That market has gotten really murky. And then also during that period of time, I made our warming Cbd Muscle Rub, which is one of my most beloved products. Something that I use morning and night. And that's this is really the main reason that I still offer CBD, is because I will always make this for myself because I rely on it. And this was made, it's very thick and waxy, whereas most CBD topicals on the market are creams that are water-based. They evaporate really fast, and therefore don't last very long. And since I'm using it on my hands, where I experience the most arthritis pain, I needed something that was super thick and was going to stay in place and stay on all day. So that's where this came about. It's warming, it's stimulating, it helps bring back blood flow and circulation. It's really nice. So I do also offer our CBD extracts. We offer like 250 milligram, 500, and 1,000. And of course, you're just going to get the same benefits that you would get from any other pure full spectrum CBD. And other than that, we have our bath fizz have CBD in them. I'm not allowed to say that on the website, so I don't know if you guys know that, but they all have a pretty good amount of CBD in them, which is just really nice for like helping relax the muscles, soreness, tenderness, achiness. So yeah. Next question. How to deal with weather-induced pain illness. I used to get achy, restless legs and sore boobs right before major weather changes. Rain, temperatures, snowfall, all of it. Now it has shifted to where I get severe back pain or severe pain in the back of my head, neck, sore throat pain in my face and teeth. It is maddening to say the least, and just wondering if anyone has tips, tricks to deal with this, because no matter how hard I try to resolve this, I just can't. So you are definitely not alone. This is very, very common, especially me being arthritic. Um, People with arthritis really respond to the barometric changes, which is what's causing that. People with fibromyalgia, anybody with chronic pain is more than likely, or an old injury, going to experience irritation from weather changes. It definitely sounds like you are on the extremity of it, but just know you are not alone. This is totally normal. I mean, I hate to use the word normal. I wish it wasn't, but it's what happens, you know, like when you look at the weather app or you watch the news, typically they will tell you what the barometric pressure is. And oftentimes when it snows, when it rains, anything, that changes by a lot. And so our joints, our muscles, everything is exposed to barometric pressure. So when that changes, our bodies are going to feel a shift. And our bodies are amazing at adapting to all kinds of things, moving, elevation, illness, etc. A barometric pressure shift happens really fast and kind of unexpected. So our bodies are trying to adapt, I'm sure, right? But it's abrupt. It's hard. So we're typically going to feel some sort of pain and irritation. You get headaches and migraines. Yeah, that's another very, very common one. So let me read you what I wrote. Changes in barometric pressure may make your tendons, muscles, and even scar tissue expand and contract and can create pain in joints affected by arthritis. Cold temperature causes changes in our blood flow, and our body naturally wants to keep us warm. So just keep in mind what's happening with your body. I'm going to leave an article for you in the chat that is about why this happens more than what you can do. But it's pretty enlightening. I know Carissa chimed in too and said that this is something she deals with, and then Julia. So maybe check that out, because once we have an understanding of it, you might naturally have some intuitive ideas of what you could do. And then there's a quote in the article that I know, Carissa, you're going to be like, she says this all the time. Anybody that I talk about pain with, I say this all the time. Chronic pain can respond to pain management techniques. To be effective, these techniques require daily practice. And that's part of pain management. Like, the word management is something that you do regularly to manage this pain. Unfortunately, you know, I hate to say this about anything, but chronic pain is the one thing that there is not quite yet a cure-all for. So typically it takes several different practices to create your pain management routine. And that's going to look different for everyone. I'm going to tell you about my pain management routine in case maybe it prompts some ideas that you don't already do. Let me see if I made any other notes. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my pain management routine. And then the other thing is, like, if you suffer from pain that's like driving you mad, like you mentioned, and you've tried all these things, or maybe like doing something daily is just too much for you, there are non-narcotic options. You can ask your doctor about NSAIDs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So my pain management routine definitely involves this. Localizing pain is important for me. Taking things is great. I think you mentioned, or no, somebody else mentioned our nerve swerve tincture. I take that pretty regularly for my nerve pain, but I also apply this directly to where I'm feeling it because that immediately warms up the muscles, the tendons, and the joints. It helps relieve some of that inflammation. Um, so for me, I'm taking some stuff internally, I'm putting some things on externally, and then I'm also doing a lot of magnesium soaks. I take magnesium. Really taking baths as often as possible is a huge part of what helps me, especially during a flare up. I try to take a warm Epsom salt, CBD magnesium bath daily, even if I can only soak for 15, 30 minutes. Um, Lots of like warming teas. Keeping my body warm is something that like helps me a lot when I'm experiencing a flare up, especially when you're having this happen from that barometric metric change. If you know it's coming, like maybe looking at the weather 10-day forecast ahead of time and maybe putting a little dot on your calendar of when you should start maybe taking some turmeric, or whatever anti-inflammatory herbs work best for you. Um, Magnesium, warming, circulatory things, because your body is trying to warm you up. That's typically what's happening when inflammation is happening, period. And that's what's causing headaches, joint pain, etc., is that inflammation. So if we can help warm ourselves up, our body's not going to have to work as hard to do that. So maybe you have a heating pad handy, extra thick socks, uh, making time for baths, you know, whatever that might look like. A facial steam, foot soaks, which that's something that I'm going to be focusing on this month. I'm not sure how many of you follow me on Instagram, but Farai, my friend that I posted something from her this month, and I'll be posting a few other things from her as the month goes on. We are also doing a collaboration on Instagram called Invitation to Nourish, where each week we have different prompts. This week it's the mind, next week it'll be the body, and I'll be talking a lot about herbal foot soaks and why they're important. Foot soaks are a huge part of, I don't even want to say just my pain management routine, because at this point foot soaks are like an important part of everything, like my lymphatic system, my circulatory system, uh, nerve pain, like it helps with all of it. I absolutely love foot soaks. And then, excuse me, if it's really bad, I know not everybody has access to a partner, but and not everybody has access to massage because it you know is a financial burden. But if you are able to have someone massage you, um, regular massage, cupping, which is something you can do yourself, drinking a ton of water to help flush those toxins, taking some antioxidants. These are all things that can also help as like preventatives. All right, we got a big question coming up. Um, Taking magnesium helps with my headaches too. Yes, I don't get headaches or migraines often, knock on wood, thank goodness. But I have heard from a lot of folks that magnesium helps them a ton. I praise magnesium, like it's a thing of worship for me. So I think it helps with so many things. Okay, next question from Sarah. I know you do a lot of this on your plant walk videos, but I would love to hear some about what you have learned intuitively and from observation about plants that don't have a lot of easily accessible herbal info available. Maybe pick a plant or two and give some depth about what you've learned from them, how you work with them, ecology observations, where you find them, what they grow near, etc. Whatever you feel inspired to talk about. So this is a huge question. I think I talked a little bit about this. I can't remember. Oh, I think it was September or October where I posted a video of just me talking. Um, and actually, I think Sarah and I engaged in a conversation over there too about intuitive plant stewardship. And I think I might have talked about this. If I did, I'll post it in the comment section. But I'm always happy to talk more about this subject. Intuitive plant learning is a love language for me. It's something that I love to talk about and hope to be able to put into words to share. It's very hard for me to put intuition into words, so bear with me. I made some notes for myself. More than, hold on, someone's coming in. More than one single plant, I tend to gather ecological observation on plants, period. This may be hard to explain. When we first moved to the land that we steward, we spent every extra moment that we had outside identifying every plant that we weren't familiar with. In doing so, and in living there for one full seasonal cycle, we began to draw observations about flat, sunny areas versus tree-filled hollers, rocky trails in the sun versus rocky creek beds, etc. We saw what fragile natives grew on the edge of giant fields of invasives like sumac, blackberry, and kudzu, and what strong natives could live amongst those. We noticed which plants grew in the exact place that others had just passed on. For example, goldenrod and ironweed are the first strong, leggy plants to spring up in late summer, soon followed by cup plant and sunchokes, then joe pye weed, boneset, milkweed, and frostweed, all bowing out and making room for the next one to rise. We observed how vining plants, such as field bindweed and passionflower, actually loved to grow in these overgrown invasive places full of herbs like lespedeza and blackberry because they could use them to their advantage to grow closer to the sun and to spread faster with less work. Ecological observations tell me more intuitively about the plant's needs, whereas sensory observations from experiencing the plant tell me more about its actions. Then I can learn what it may offer medicinally. So I'm going to dive into that. But basically what I'm trying to say is, for me, when I'm making ecological observations, I'm learning more about the plant than I'm learning what it may have to offer me, right? So when I was doing plant walks in person, I did them at the same park every time, and I did it once a month. And the reason that I had that ambitious idea of doing it once a month was because I wanted to be able to teach this to other people. What I had learned from walking the same trails, the same area, once a month for a year or more, one cycle of each season, was I saw these sort of like ecological observations, what plants grew next to each other every year, what plants climbed on each other and why, which plants could not survive near the invasives, which couldn't, which ones bowed out and made room for the next ones. And so if I had the same people show up to every plant walk, or even just 1 month back to 1 month, they could observe those same things that I was observing. And so it's very hard to teach this without being able to show people. But what I mean by, I'll just give you some visualizations. At the top of our hill on our property, we have a big sunny open field, that we can barely walk through because it's full of blackberry, sumac, and kudzu. And it's covered. And so there's really not much else that grows up in there. However, there are plants that will grow on the very edges of this crazy field full of invasives because they'll use it to their advantage to climb over it. And so those examples being like passion flower vine and field bindweed, which is kind of like a wild morning glory, they'll grow on the outsides and they'll climb up and over, and then they can be closer to the sun. They're not getting covered up because they're on top, and they can reach the other side of the field and spread their seeds quicker and easier than if they were working alone, right? So these are the kinds of things that we would observe. And then the first plant, like the first fall plants we see late summer where I live, are goldenrod and ironweed. Beautiful purple yellow show. Well, as soon as those die, the plants that literally rise up right next to them, so I imagine their roots are all like kind of hanging out the whole time throughout the year and like waiting for their chance to shine, is, like I mentioned, the Joe Pye weed, boneset, milkweed, frostweed. These are all plants that are not fragile. They're not like tiny little fragile plants like self-heal and St. John's wort, but they're not crazy invasive either, like sumac or kudzu or blackberry. So they can kind of coexist and share the space a lot more easily than those invasive plants. So I guess what I'm trying to say is those are my ecological observations. Those observations are logged in my brain. So when I go to do a plant walk on somebody else's land, I have a pretty good idea of what's going to be growing there based on, is it a sunny open field? Are there like crazy invasive plants there? Do they have a wooded forest canopy area, etc.? And that's going to tell me what plants we might find there. As far as intuition about what the plants might offer medicinally, let me see what you asked. Yeah, learning intuitively. That to me is energetics, and I have a video that I'm posting soon on energetics for you guys. But to give you a short example, when it's hot outside, like hot southern summer, and we don't want to eat hot foods, we want to eat like popsicles, watermelon, cold smoothies. That is energetics. Our body is saying, it's hot as fuck, give me some cold shit to cool me down. That is simply energetics. So when you're applying energetics to a plant, you're noticing the same way you notice that putting cold popsicles in your mouth cools you off. Is this plant like turmeric or a pepper or ginger? Is it hot and spicy, or is it more like marshmallow? What's another good example of a mint? You know, things that are like cooling and lighter in flavor. So that's all energetics is, simply is like, if you're hot, you're typically going to want a cooling herb. If you're cold, you're typically going to want to warm up with warming herbs. And of course, there's a lot more to it, but very simply put. So when I'm intuitively observing a plant, what I'm doing is experiencing it through my senses. And the word for that is, if you've been here a while, you better know this word. I'll wait. Organolepsis. All right. Organolepsis is a word that means drawing conclusions about a plant's energetics based on your experience with it sensory wise. I just kind of butchered the hell out of that. But if I find wild mountain mint, which this is a story that happened to me. I didn't know what it was at one point in my life. It was striking. It looked like a mint family plant. It smelled like one. It had the square stem, so I thought, okay, I'm gonna taste it. So I put a little bit in my mouth. It was super minty and cooling, but kind of different than other mints. And I knew it was not just like wild mint. There was something different about it. And so, point of that being, how, I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't tasted it. But because I smelled it, I touched it, I tasted it, I was able to experience that it was minty, kind of spicy. It had that cooling minty smell that just like takes over your face and tingles. Um, So, Victoria, even with like plants like poke and elderberry, taking a nibble of it is not going to kill you. So, that's why I say take a little nibble. Like, I'm obviously not going to take that whole mint plant and shove the entire thing down my throat. I'm going to take a little pinch of it and take a nibble. And taking a pinch of poke is actually great for you. With poke and elderberry, for example, which are both plants that have toxic properties. I don't like to call them poisonous. Um, they have what's it called? They have the hard seeds, stone seeds. I can't remember the name, but intuitively, if you bite into a fruit, so like the elderberry or the poke fruit, and you have a hard, rocky pit, your brain tells you to spit it out, right? So that's great because if you eat elderberries or pokeberries and you spit the seeds out, you're not getting many of those toxic properties at all. Most of the toxic properties are in the seed. So taking a nibble of the leaf is super fine. Taking a nibble of the berry is actually great for you. Just spit that seed out. So, however, if you are newer, you're not familiar with what it is that you're tasting, like this story of me and mountain mint, just take a little bit of a nibble. And I know that I am not as scared as other people. If you're more nervous about this, that's fine. I totally get it. Spit it out. Taste it, spit it out, don't swallow it. You're totally fine. So that's what organolepsis means, is using your intuition, using your senses to intuitively decide about a plant. So we learn so much from smell and taste, the way it feels. So not even just taste, right? Like flavor is the combination of the smell and your palate. How it feels in your mouth is like once you nibble into that, are you like kind of secreting? Are you reacting the way you do to like sour things or bitter things, etc.? Okay, so the other thing I wanted to mention, because she specifically asked that I give some examples, and this is the example I always give. So, like Victoria, Sarah, who asked this question, I think Julia, you've probably heard this. A lot of you have probably heard this story, so I'm sorry, but it's just the easiest one to talk about. Wild dog fennel is a plant that's native to this region that there is zero research about. And this happens a lot, especially with mushrooms. You go to look it up after you've gone, done all your work identifying it, zero information. And you're like, well, shit, it grows abundantly, it looks good, it tastes good, like I want it. What do I do? So, what I was really inspired by earlier in my experience with herbalism was when I would look up those plants. Another example is anemone. Um, there's wild anemone, you can grow anemone, tons of varieties. Well, there's not much research about what anemone does for you. However, if you look up medicinal properties of anemone, you will find an extensive study done by the herbalist Seven Song. And Seven Song is one of my favorite herbalists for this reason. There's Rosemary Gladstar, Phyllis Light. There's some other ones that will occasionally do this, but I have never seen anybody do it as often or as extensively as the herbalist Seven Song. And so what he will do when there is a plant such as anemone that people are interested in, but there's not research about, is he will take it upon himself. So what's the difference in me or Seven Song and a scientist, um, observing and isolating the experience with this plant. Where does the knowledge of how plants and mushrooms react in the human body come from? Some people might just say science. Okay, well, where does that come from? A study. Where does that study happen? Either on a human or an animal. So another thing is, I know for a fact that my body, and Augustine, my son's body, is far more tolerant of things like tannin rich things, which can be harmful to people if there's too many tannins, like black walnut and stuff, than other people's, because we eat raw wild foods a lot. And we're not like downing raw elderberries or downing raw pine needles. We're taking a bite and experiencing it on a plant walk, right? We're, just we eat things a lot, and so our bodies are adapting to that. And our bodies have really strayed away from that because there's not many wild raw foods in our diets anymore. So that's another thing to think about is I have taken that personal responsibility on. I don't expect other people to do it. But I trust my body because I know how I've reacted to things in the past to learn from a plant. So with wild dog fennel, for example, I really need to reel it back in because I've only covered 1 of 4 pages and it's been an hour. So this might need to be 2 parts. We saw this wild fennel and we were like, wow, that looks like wild fennel. We smelled it. It smelled like fennel. I tasted it. It tasted like fennel. I went crazy trying to identify it because it wasn't in any of my books. I finally confirmed the identity. It was wild dog fennel. There was no information. Well, now I've smelled and tasted this. It smells and tastes like fennel. I want to use it, right? I'm curious. So I took it home and I ate a little bit of it every day, a tiny bit. And I would increase it slowly, depending on, no reaction. I didn't have any reaction. And I ended up being fine with it. Francesco was fine with it. Augustine was fine with it. So we ended up starting to cook with it. I tried tincturing some. I infused some in vinegar. I made a little tea. We added some to a breakfast sausage. We tried it raw, cooked, all these different ways. But we started slow. And if you are experiencing plants intuitively, just like my answer to your question, Victoria, about talking about tasting plants that are potentially toxic or poisonous, if you quiet yourself enough to hear your intuition is going to tell you to spit out a seed that is so hard that you can't chew it. And just like yew berry, which is poisonous, pokeberry, and elderberries, which are toxic, when you bite into that fruit, ow, you spit it out. Now, if you are not if you're not feeling intuitive, right? Like if you go into the woods with your cell phone, a bunch of buddies, maybe you're drinking or smoking or whatever you're doing that's distracting you, maybe you're not that in touch with your intuition, so you just swallow it. That's not a good way to experience plants. So that would be my advice is maybe don't nibble plants if you're not going into the experience grounded and quieting your mind and free of distractions, because that is definitely what the plants require. Your intuition is strong as hell. If you bite into a too ripe persimmon, I don't know who else has done that, but it's awful. A too ripe mayapple, it dries every last drop of moisture in your mouth out. Are you going to continue eating that? Fuck no, you're going to spit it out. That is your intuition protecting you. So that's my way of learning. I know it's not for everybody, but I hope I answered that enough because we have got to move on. The last thing that I wanted to say there, and this is also in the video that I'll be posting on energetics, there are things that we find in common with multiple plants. For example, wild lettuce and milkweed both have a milky latex inside of them. Seaweed, slippery elm bark, marshmallow root, they're all like slimy, burdock, and mucilaginous. Then we've got bitter plants like mint family plants, some spices, uh, bitter stuff, sweet, minty, etc. Those are also all things that your organolepsis is helping you decipher from as you begin to experience plants. Okay. I'm going to try to answer a couple of the quicker questions just to move us along real quick. Let me mark the ones that I need to come back to. All right. This question is about foot health and specifically about plantar warts. We have your antifungal dry balm. Could that help? I feel like it might be more for athlete's foot or nail fungus. Thank you. So it is more for athlete's foot or nail fungus. You still could use it. Plantar warts specifically need to be kept very dry, which is very hard because they're on your foot. So my biggest recommendation, which has similar antifungal herbs, would actually be our hair and body powder. Because you can shake that into your shoe, whichever shoe you have the plantar wart on, and it's going to help keep things dry and clean, and there's all those antimicrobial and antifungal properties. But the other thing is, so it will be good in that regard of like keeping it dry and, cleanish. Plantar warts are actually caused by a type of HPV, which makes it more of a viral issue than like a fungal or bacterial issue. So while it's important to keep it clean, you need antiviral herbs, and there's all kinds of remedies for plantar warts, and all of them are going to help to some degree. But I would say at the very root, just like a cold sore is a type of HPV, that virus is playing out, unfortunately. So I would be taking and applying antiviral herbs. So like herbs like lemon balm and St. John's wort would be great. Echinacea could be good. That's going to be the most important thing. And then of course you can silicic acid. You can get pure silicic acid, and that will help just to kind of burn through those top layers. Maybe do that for a week, a couple weeks, and then apply those antiviral herbs, because warts are pretty dense. So without kind of burning through some of those layers, it'll be harder for those herbs to reach it. But I would be taking an antiviral and applying an antiviral. All right. Let me see if there's any other quick ones I can burn through. Okay, here's another quicker one. Carissa asks, and I know this is a common thing, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on what to do with all the essential oils I have. My mom and aunt belonged to an essential oil MLM for several years, and I was buying lots of oils from them. In the past couple years, I've learned so much more about essential oils and the harm that they can cause both to plants and the environment and humans if used improperly. So now I have this huge collection of oils that I'm no longer taking or using, and I don't want to throw them away. I would love to hear your thoughts and anyone else's on this. Great question. I know this is super common amongst people who are interested in herbs. Essential oils can be a gateway for a lot of folks. Essential oils aren't evil. Of course, they are fucked up to plants, the environment, just like you said. They have become a very sacred thing to me. For example, I love like special absolutes and like rose damascus essential oil, and I buy like the tiniest bit that I can afford, and I use like one drop at a time. So I think just like anything else in the plant world, if we're using them respectfully, in a small amounts and safely, I use them in household cleaners. I use them in diffusers. So those would be my recommendations to you. Also, in things like making yourself a little roll on, if you're filling that with like witch hazel or jojoba oil, and you're just adding a couple drops, that would be considered using it safely. Just really diluting it. And then same with household cleaners. We make all of our household cleaners, and we might add, 3 milliliters of essential oils to like a half-gallon bottle. That would be considered safe. And you might be still getting some of those like good antibacterial, antimicrobial properties. And then same with diffusing them. If you've got a diffuser and you're putting just a couple drops in like 8 ounces of water that you're diffusing into the air, there's actually like quite a few benefits to that. So I would say definitely not taking them internally and being very safe about how you're using them externally. And a good way to avoid that is to just use them in cleaners and diffusers. I also add a couple drops to our homemade laundry detergent to keep everything smelling really good. So those are my ideas. Of course, anybody feel free to chime in. And then let me see, there's a couple notes that have come in. Yeah, so Ramblin' Farmers comment in the chat room about a comment that I made that the same plants grow everywhere. What I'm saying when I say that is I actually saw a picture in my phone today of I can't remember the name right now, but it was a goldenrod that we found in Wyoming. And when I looked at it, I knew it was goldenrod. And Francesca was like, "How do you know that's goldenrod? It looks nothing like goldenrod." It doesn't look like the goldenrod we're used to because it's growing in a completely different environment. But so the same plants essentially do grow in most regions, but they look entirely different. And so that's another very important part of learning energetics, is that if you can identify mints, if you can identify the aster family plants, etc., it will really help you identify plants that you're not familiar with. Okay. There were a couple questions I mentioned that I'm not going to go over today because they need their own video. Sorry, when I talk this much, my throat gets really dry. Liz asks, in the case of your jar set with sediment, which what she's talking about is when I do a dual extraction, or when anyone does, there's typically sediment in the bottom. And I was talking in a video, which if you all want to see the video, it's a dual extraction video on Lion's Mane. Could you add more water or alcohol to it after? And she also asks, for hard resins, alcohol and oil both draw out the important constituents. Would that be true for most other herbs? Basically, all these questions are about solubility, which is just as important of a topic as energetics. So I promise you, I will have a video coming out soon on solubility and energetics. And Mary asks, I tried to review previous questions and I'm sure you've answered this. I'm interested in how to repair the vitality of the nervous system and the circulatory system. So I have gone over this, but I will go over it again gladly anytime. Again, it's a little too long for this video. I did want to say though, specifically for that question, I would absolutely watch my 2 videos. It might be easier for you to search them on YouTube, but one is how to let herbs change your life, and how to manage your herbal routine. Those 2 videos talk a lot about this question. All right, back on track. As someone who is new to using plant medicine, is there a limit to how much I can take in a day? For example, I have the nerve swerve tincture to help with joint pain after workouts and altered states to help me with sleep. But if I take one for the day, I typically don't take the other. I also recently started taking the Firewalker tonic. I want to be careful because plant medicine is still medicine, and I wasn't sure if there were certain things that interact badly. Great question. First off, you can actually take all 3 of those in the same day. So just want to put that out there. Oh shit, sorry. Somebody was asking to get in. Is there a way on Zoom to just automatically let people enter? Because I swear I have that checked, but I still have to admit people in. Anyways, to the person that just joined, I just got done answering your question. Just throwing that out there in case you had only tuned in for your question. I'll of course post the recording, Rachel, right after this live. So just remember I answered it about an hour in because it's 5 now and we started at 4. Okay, so I just want to read a couple things from my frequently asked questions on my website that kind of apply to this question. Oh, and also the two videos that I just mentioned, how to let herbal products change your life and how to manage your herbal regime. Those two videos also go over like taking multiple things in a day. So to the person that asked this question, Alyssa, you should also check out those two videos. So here's some stuff from my FAQ. How much should I use? Dosage is a highly personal part of herbal products. It depends on the person using it, how much they're using, which product they're using, and what they're using it for. Each of our products have general recommended dosage, but we highly encourage some independent research and intuition. You can often look up the herbs in a formula to find out more about dosage by weight and use. You can also typically determine intuitively based on your own desired outcome. For example, some might simply be trying to nourish and maintain a particular system of the body, while others may be actively fighting infection. It is always best to consult with any practitioners you may be seeing. So here's an example. Our antiviral tincture. To the person that's got a plantar wart that they're trying to get rid of, they're actively trying to get rid of that. So they might take that more regularly than than someone who is like, I need to up my antivirals to protect my body from the virus, right? So that would be an example of like somebody actively fighting something versus someone like maintaining prevention. So someone maintaining prevention is not going to take nearly as much as someone actively fighting something. So that's what I mean about dosage being super personal. Another thing is, do you weigh 40 pounds or 400 pounds? You know, is it a dog or a human? Obviously, I know it's a human asking, but that weight determines a lot. Did you just eat or is it an empty stomach? There's so many factors. So, what I recommend is if you're taking something regularly, um, looking into the herbs and pulling up interactions. There are much fewer herbal interactions than there are drug herb interactions. For example, if you're taking blood pressure medication, there are certain antiviral herbs that you should not take, stuff like that. So if you're on any medications, rather than going one by one looking at herbs, I would simply type in, Wellbutrin herbal interactions, and you will find lists of herbs that do not interact well with Wellbutrin. So that said, unless a formula is like totally polar opposite, like they do opposite things. Let's say, what's a good example here? I'm having a hard time being put on the spot by myself right now. But essentially, like we were saying with energetics, if you need to be taking like a moistening, cooling tonic for whatever's going on, um, you wouldn't want to then also take a very drying, warming tonic because that would counterbalance. So, as far as herbal interactions, I would kind of think more intuitively that way. And what you just told me that you're taking, you can take all those together in a day. I'm not a big fan of taking everything together at once. But again, that's another intuitive thing, right? Like you're only taking nerve swerve after a workout. You're only taking altered states before bed. You're not taking it in the morning. So maybe you take Firewalker after your first meal of the day. And that is what I go over in that video, like how to manage your herbal routine is kind of some ideas of when to take different things. So I hope that that helped. And then just to go over drug interactions, I think I already just did this, but if you're on any prescription drugs, we suggest looking up interactions with the herbs you wish to use. If you're working with a health practitioner, you may consult with them. If you are not, please do some research online or by reading the Herb and Drug Interaction book. Without working with folks one-on-one, herbalists are not legally allowed to answer those personalized questions. Okay, another question from this person is, When you first started foraging, did you ever come into contact with something you were allergic to or had a bad reaction to out in the field? What about an unexpected animal encounter, good or bad? We have to be cautious about rattlesnakes and black bears here, and possibly mountain lions. Okay, um, because it's already been an hour and a half and I've got to wrap this up, I'm only going to answer the first part. However, if you are curious about my animal experiences, you should listen to my podcast episode on our numinous nature with Philippe, one of my dear friends. It's a really great episode where I talk about my intro to herbalism. And he's a storyteller. He loves stories. So we also talk a lot about plant and animal experiences. And I go over 2 different animal experiences in that episode. So check that out for the second part of your question. Um, and I think it was only like 3 episodes back. And his podcast, Our Numinous Nature, is on all the podcast things. Okay, coming in contact with something I was allergic to, no. I don't have any food or herb allergens. I've been blessed in that way. The only thing that I've ever had an interesting reaction to was lobelia, which is one of my absolute favorite plants. Lobelia was one of the first plants that kind of was like smacked me in the face and said, like, do your research before you mess with me. And I hate calling lobelia pukeweed because, again, this is just like one of those experiences that wouldn't really happen if I had been more intuition led and hadn't just been like distracted and wanting to learn as much as I could. But lobelia is similar to pokeweed, something that you need to take at a very small dose. So if I've got a 1 ounce formula that's got like, let's say, just for fun, yarrow, goldenrod, raspberry. Well, I would really do like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and then I would put a few drops of pokeberry, maybe like 5 to 10 milliliters of lobelia. And all that happened was I had a really bad stomach ache and felt really nauseous. Some people take too much and they vomit. Some people purposely take enough to make them vomit. So just, I would say using herbs in excess was a lesson that I had to learn early on, to not do that. But I'm not allergic to poison ivy or, stuff like that that I know a lot of people have major reactions to. I get asked a lot from folks how I deal with poison ivy and forage, and yeah, I don't have a reaction, thankfully. Okay, I need to go back to a longer question. Victoria asks, could you provide information regarding supporting a mother and baby during pregnancy through each trimester and labor? I can make some recommendations on supporting a mother during pregnancy. I can't go through each trimester and labor, especially for women who are interested in pre-birth and using herbal medicine to support them if there were to be complications with pregnancy and or labor. Okay, as far as going through each trimester and labor and complications, I would definitely look to a midwife. Heading into no signal land. Bye, Allison. Thank you for your questions. Definitely look to a midwife. I can't give those answers because I truly don't have them. I haven't like worked with people during labor and birth. However, I have supported many friends and family through pregnancy and postpartum, so I can definitely answer that. But what I also wanted to say, Victoria, I don't know if you saw, I said it on Discord as well. You need to just buy this book, if you don't already have it. Rosemary Gladstar's Herbal Healing for Women has literally everything you need. So there are chapters on fibroids, ovarian cysts, cervical dysplasia. There's complicated labor and pregnancy and postpartum and menopause, which is another part of this question. It even goes into like Rosemary Gladstar's favorite herbs, herbal formulas that she's used with great success, etc. So this is something I reach for a lot when I'm supporting friends and family through pregnancy. This would be my number one recommendation. Um, so as far as supporting someone through pregnancy, I'm actually supporting multiple friends through pregnancy right now. Megan, who I share my office space with, Sister Nettle, she just entered her third trimester. My photographer, many people in my life are entering pregnancy, which is so exciting. And so the biggest thing that I would say, and this could be a really great learning opportunity for you too, is listen to their needs. You know, it's different for everybody. Meg had a crazy amount of morning sickness, and not just morning sickness. She had a lot of trouble eating, period. She was nauseous 24/7. She was miserable. So, specifically listening to that need, I made a few different things for her. I made her a broth that was easier to sip than, or and easier to stomach than like a meal. I made her a tea for in the morning, and made some suggestions to her based on her specific diagnoses, which I can't, share with you guys here, but she does have some other things going on before the pregnancy that were affecting some things. So listening to those very specific needs to the individual and trying to address them one at a time. I wouldn't say like if Megan was experiencing morning sickness and diarrhea and other gastrointestinal disorders and all this other stuff, I wouldn't be like, here's a tea for you. No, I would say, I would do what I did. Like, here's a tea for in the morning when you're experiencing nausea. Here's a tea for, or a broth to help you get these nutrients while you're unable to eat. Here's a soak for you in the bath since you can't take magnesium without, disrupting your digestion. So, to support someone through pregnancy, address those needs, one at a time. But also, there are things that kind of just work for everybody across the board, which is going to be, we know that when we are pregnant, we are growing a baby. That baby is taking a lot of our nutrients. So load them up with the minerals and vitamins and nutrients that they're losing. So someone who is pregnant really needs to be drinking either very mineral rich herbal broths and infusions, or bone broths and maybe adding some herbs to the broth. With Megan, I gave her some herbs that she could add to her bone broth or make a broth from, just to kind of add those vitamins and nutrients that baby was taking, but also that she couldn't get because she was too nauseous to eat. And then we also know that most pregnant ladies and even postpartum are very iron deficient. So something like our black nettle iron syrup is really, 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 really good. And then same with our mountain mama tea, which is also pretty specific to pregnancy and postpartum mamas. I'll read you this guy. A nourishing blend for all women, but especially pre and post pregnancy mamas. Each of these herbs were chosen with the intention to nourish the body, detoxify for hormonal balance and optimal health support, uterine tone, build blood, and support a healthy stress response. So those are all things that we can pretty much assume that anybody who's pregnant is experiencing. So these are kind of like if someone asks me to make them a care package for someone that's pregnant that I don't know their specific issues or any other pre-existing health conditions, I would definitely give them like a good mineral nutrient rich tea, an iron supplement of some sort, maybe something for their stools, maybe something for helping with the uterine walls, the pelvic floor strengthening, etc. Okay, and then the next question. I would also love any information regarding menopause, herbs that can support women who are going through menopause, especially if the effects are long lasting. So, I love talking about menopause. Although I have not gone through it, I was very close to my mother still living at home as a teenager when she experienced menopause, and it was fucking awful, and there were very limited resources. And I feel like menopause is an area where herbalism can really shine. And so I wish that it was talked about more. I'm trying to pull up our pause tincture. Yeah, so we make a tincture called pause, that's for menopause. The description is an herbal blend to replenish adrenal exhaustion and common discomfort due to deplenishing hormone levels, which is the reason for every symptom that comes with menopause, is that loss of estrogen. These vitamin and mineral rich herbs help ease menopausal symptoms and bring the body back to homeostasis. It's got raspberry leaf, which is like very toning and tightening of the uterine walls. It's got dong quai and eleuthero root, which are just incredible tonics for people with uterus and ovaries. Schisandra berry, white peony, and um, white peony and sage is a combination that specifically helps with excessive sweating and hot flashes, and black cohosh root. So that would be like something, just to give you an idea of herbs that I recommend for folks to take daily who are experiencing menopause. Nobody has talked about it more than Rosemary Gladstar. So again, get yourself this book because she's got a fabulous chapter on menopause. And let me see if there's anything in it that I wanted to. It's just amazing. She's got, she talks about all the deficiencies, different remedies and herbs that you can use to help with them, what's happening when you're experiencing menopause, why it's taboo, etc. So menopause is caused by a decrease in estrogen production. Less estrogen makes your vaginal tissues thinner, drier, less elastic, and more fragile. That's where things come in like pain during sex, dryness, itchiness, irritation. Regular sexual activity, either with or without a partner, can help prevent the symptoms of menopause. Sexual activity increases blood flow to the vagina, which helps keep the vaginal tissues healthy. So this is so important, and I know this can be very awkward to talk about if it's, your mother or your grandmother, but it's the most important part. Using a small wand if they're having pain during sex, which you mentioned, something very, very small and curved, a wand of sorts to stimulate. And I would even say, if this is someone who isn't very sexually active and is not very interested in sexual activity, I would literally prescribe it. Like, okay, don't do it for that then. Don't do it for pleasure. But once a day, you must sit down and lubricate yourself and stimulate yourself some sort of way. This can be clitoral stimulation, this can be internal, G-spot stimulation, but we literally need that in order for our body to even tell, the vagina that it needs to moisten itself. Also, because of the contracting that's happening, because of the blood flow, the stimulation, the circulation, all those things are necessary to strengthening those tissues, keeping things, wet. It's important. You can use herbal suppositories. One of my friends, Lydia, made amazing ones. Unfortunately, she's not making them right now, Wild and Vibrant, but I'm sure there are people making similar. Hers are little balls. I think they're set in cocoa butter. They've got some herbs like shatavari, just wild yam, just good herbs for that. I know there's probably tons on the market. Just make sure what you're getting is clean, natural, herbal. But those will be really good for treating the symptoms. Adding that moisture is going to help with pain, itchiness, tissue tone, etc. And then also a lot of people add herbs like wild yam and black cohosh and stuff that's going to help a little bit with that hormone regulation. Even plain old vitamin E, I know that's pretty popular for that. Sea buckthorn berry, internally and externally, is actually a really great thing for menopausal vaginal symptoms. If I were to recommend internal stuff, drinking a ton of water, like drinking the recommended amount of water a day, like whatever crazy amount it is, 8 cups, a gallon. Um, and that can be through infusions. And I would definitely make a moistening infusion, something with herbs like marshmallow root, slippery elm, dandelion, burdock, milky oats, especially. Um, Sea moss can be kind of hard to stomach. I know there's recipes out there that kind of hide it in smoothies, or they make like a sea moss applesauce. That's a very moistening mucilaginous moss. So those could be good internal ideas to bring moisture to the body, the tissues. The cool thing is mucilaginous herbs like marshmallow root, dandelion, burdock, slippery elm, they are activating the mucosa, which is like what's helping keep things lubricated. So those would be my recommendations. That's a great question. I really should one day sit down with my mom and do a video just on menopause. All right. Oh, and then Victoria, you mentioned a couple other symptoms in here. Thank you, Carissa. It's my dinner time too. um, Painful joints, depression, anxiety, sleep issues, and brain fog. So, as far as those, like, those are symptoms, right? So, they don't need to be treated specifically to menopause. They can be treated just like anything else that might cause those things. So for the brain fog, for the sleep issues, I would recommend like herbs that are in our brain fog tea and tincture, herbs that are in our rest in peace tea and tincture. Um, Treat it how you would treat those things normally is all I'm saying. It doesn't have to be catered to menopause, because the only way you could really cater it is to help with that hormonal imbalance. But those things are just going to happen. So it would be good to treat them anyways to make it a more comfortable experience. Alrighty. I'm either on my last or second to last question. Let me just make sure. All right, yes. So Kara, we're on an hour and 40 minutes, so probably. Yes, yours was the first question. So yeah, Kara, when I post the recording, right after this, I post it as soon as it's over. It just has to load and all that. I go over your question in the very beginning. Okay. Um, Ramblin' Farmers wanted to talk a little bit about leaving dependency on social media. Um, would also like to know more about solstice herbs, spirituality, traditions, folklore. I've been wanting to dive deeper into herbs that open up the heart for a more soulful connection to the universe, specifically related to moon phases or seasons, spiritual herbs, I suppose, or where to learn more about these topics. Um, so this is a lot of questions in one, and I will give you my answer at the end, but I want to start by saying, uh, like, I am not, I don't use a lot of herbs just for spirituality. You know what I mean? I'm a very spiritual person, but most of the spiritual tools that I use are nature based, like being outside, hands in the soil. That's something else I talk a lot about in that podcast episode on our numinous nature. But I'm not necessarily taking herbs to connect in that way. So I wanted to recommend a friend of mine though, and also with the folklore, I absolutely love folklore, but my specialty is more specifically folk herbalism and folk traditions related to herbalism. Um, and I will definitely make a longer video on that one day. But my biggest recommendation for you would be to look up the work of Leo Droon Witchcraft. And she has a Patreon. She has a great Patreon. She's a zine maker, so you could support her on Patreon, or you could go to her Etsy and buy her zines. I actually think I have one with me. They're little, and they're very affordable, and it's great because she handwrites and illustrates them. They're super cute, but she's more into using herbs spiritually than she even is like medicinally. So she would be a really great resource for everything that you asked in this question. Um, she focuses specifically on folklore, spirituality, and herbs and seasons. So, what you were saying about connecting throughout the seasons, she makes seasonal zines. So, she puts one out every spring, summer, fall, winter, and she really goes over what recipes she's making, what herbs she's using, what moons she's connecting with. So I think she would be perfect for everything that you just asked. I wish I could be of more of a help. These are things that I'm like super interested in and I love. They're just not like my direct specialty. Uh yeah, here she talks about harvest lore. Like this just seems so specific to everything that you mentioned, and they're so cute. I absolutely love them. Just to give you guys a little bit more about the contents, this is the summer one. What summer means to a witch, Litha, the summer solstice, flora and foods of Litha, the Litha altar, a darkness vanishing solstice ritual, llamas, the first harvest, a llamas picnic feast, hand-dyed altar cloths, harvesting lore, a poor folk spell for the Banshee Queen, pagan summer tradition, summer craft magic, summertime spells, the folklore of strawberries, etc. So lots of really cool stuff in here. I love supporting her. Um, and then I feel like there was a part though that I was able to answer. Oh, okay. So you guys, Ramblin' Farmers, came a little later in the first half of the video. Actually, no, you came in as I was talking about that. But I think you missed it. I was talking a bit about my seasonal practice, which my seasonal practice, you mentioned wanting to connect, to plant seasonally, is more in ecological observation and using fresh plants in each season and kind of documenting which plants are out in which season, working with those plants, then jotting some notes down about them, pressing them in a book. I just kind of went over my practice seasonally, so that might be of help to this question as well. And then also in the first half of the live Q&A, we talked a lot about Discord, which I know you and I specifically talked a lot about that in person as well. And that is a big goal of mine in this new year, is to focus more on crowd managed, user managed apps that can't sell themselves, that don't have like this weird hierarchy, advertisement, all that shit. So without diving too deep, because we're 10 minutes away from 2 hours and I'm hungry, I have ordered these little stickers that are flaps over your cameras. I was thinking about, we have an iPad that Augustine uses for school, and because of where we live in the country, we don't have normal internet. We have like a little hotspot box, and they've given us the option in the past of using a phone instead of a hot box. So we've kind of considered that, and then if we had that, maybe we could dedicate one of the phones to having those apps so that they're not on the phones that we carry with us all the time. But I'm like Sarah of Among the Oaks Farm mentioned in our solstice post a couple weeks ago talking about this topic, which I'm not sure if you saw that, Logan, but we have a post that was specific to the social media stuff and the solstice and all that. Um, she mentioned being somewhat excited about it, which I have to agree. I think it's kind of half-assed supporting small businesses to just follow them on Instagram. And I am not even saying by not financially supporting them, I just mean deepening your support by becoming a newsletter subscriber, or just even connecting with them anywhere off of that app, be it email, be it checking out their blog or their Pinterest or their Discord or their Patreon, etc. Just for your favorite businesses. And I know I say this a lot about Patreon, but I think it's the coolest place to connect with the businesses that I love and support, because I really enjoy the layout of being able to scroll the same way that you would on Instagram. Let me pull mine up. So yeah, being able to click the feed button and scroll through everybody that I'm supporting on Patreon's posts is really exciting to me, because whenever I have that urge to click on Instagram, instead I'll click something like Pinterest or Patreon or Discord, where what I'm scrolling through is feeding me, it's educational, it's content that I'm here for. So that's what I'm doing personally, is just kind of trying to shift my focus into either more creating or more like growing through the content that I'm taking in. And then I listen to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts. Uh, I love the Marco Polo app. I use that to connect with friends that, aren't local or that I can't see because of quarantine. Um, and it's nice because it's not FaceTime, it's not through Facebook or Instagram. It's actually a pretty small company. So anyways, that concludes our very big, long, rescheduled December live Q&A. And that said, we're still having our January one, so feel free to ask more questions that maybe came up tonight or that have come up for you another time. Feel free to like tell me what you guys are interested in right now, what videos you'd like to see, etc. I'm definitely working on, like I mentioned, a pine sap oil infusion video, an energetics video, solubility video. The next time I use my percolator, I'll post a video about that. Powdering herbs, stuff like that. I really try to just make videos of what I'm doing. But if you guys have special requests, I will always consider them. And then we also have a tier 4 option with our Patreon, which is $50. But the cool thing about it is you can pay for it 1 month if you want to, and you get your own private class. So if there's something that you're really wanting to learn about, you could upgrade your tier for 1 month and request that private topic, and I make a video specifically for you and that topic for each month. And then of course you also get the once a month gift, and every 6 months, if you were to stay that long, you get a gift basket. And then before I go, just wanted to mention again that my friend Farai and I also have a Instagram challenge. Funny to say after talking about social media. Not a challenge, that's not the right way to put it. An Instagram prompt. We, in the month of December, talked just about every day. We were trying to slow down, be present with family, nourish our bodies, our mind, our spirit. And so we decided to share all those resources with you guys in January for free. Most of the prompts are free and very accessible to anybody, anywhere. And each week is a different topic: mind, body, spirit, soul, etc. And just talking about ways and inviting you to nourish those parts of yourself, slow down and focus on those things. And there will be a giveaway at the end. So feel free to check that out if you're interested. All right, thank you guys so much. I'm gonna go eat, drink water, etc. Oh, I didn't know you got the time wrong, Rachel, but no worries. Oh, sorry, you just sent it privately. Okay, thank you guys so much, and I'll post a recording soon. Thank you, everybody.